Welcome to the Gritty Gospel Podcast, where we are unveiling the gospel truth in the grittiest moments of life.
Thank you again for joining me for another episode of the podcast, and I hope that all is well with you and yours. A new year is upon us, and so I thought it would be fitting to kind of deal with the New Year's resolution, right? We are all seeking to make positive change in the new year, and ultimately, I know for a lot of us, we seek to do this on a daily basis, but we run into the challenge of how do we overcome so many of the things that seem to set us back. And I have been in search to try to figure out what is the path to success? What is the path to achieving my goals? And of course, first you need to identify them and figure them out, and then you can make a plan to pursue them. But then inevitably we run into, breaking old habits, the challenges that seem to keep coming up and tripping us up. And I wanted to understand that, God, if you are a God that was able to complete the plan of redemption for us so that we can overcome the sin that so easily trips us up and sets us back, then how do we successfully follow that path forward? And often I've heard the phrase that success is found through failing and failing forward. In other words, that means that you got to keep going and get back up whenever you have a mistake. But I mean, it just seems like there's just those times where we just can't get over the hump. So I really wanted to do a deep dive into this and figure it out. So that way we could together move forward with some tools. And I know that the gospel has the answers to everything. That's the whole point of this podcast. But what is it? And where do we find it? How do we equip it? So I wanted to start with Resolute and what does it mean? And one of the definitions describes it as admirably purposeful, determined, and unwavering. And sometimes it seems impossible to be able to obtain this because we have our moods and our emotions and we have things from the outside that always seem to affect us. But I believe that it's possible. There is a word to describe it. And we've seen examples of people doing it. Of course, the greatest example of Christ, who said that he was going to essentially save mankind through his works. And he did it. He did it by living a perfect life and dying for our sins and then being raised from the dead, a seemingly impossible task. But if we follow that path of pursuing the virtues of God, then we would be able to obtain it. This is the promise that's held before us. But how do we do this when we are imperfect beings? And ultimately, it kind of led me to the difference between vice and virtue. Do we live a life that is riddled with vices, or do we live a life that is fulfilled through virtue? And in order to kind of understand that, the simple breakdown of these two words is as this: virtue are good habits in concrete, and vice are bad habits in the concrete. So I'm utilizing horseandchariot.com, which I found to be a great resource, and I'll have those links as well for you all to check out. But I would highly recommend visiting horseandchariot.com. And in it, virtue is described as this: virtue enables you to know the good, do the good, and pursue the good in everything you think, say, and do. Doing the good and right thing one time is not a virtue, but rather a good deed. Virtue, then, is the habitual disposition to do the good and right thing, God's will, every time, without exception. Virtues are good habits in the concrete. In opposition to that would be the vice. Vice, then, are bad habits in the concrete. Avoiding the good or doing what's contrary to God's will one time is a bad deed. Avoiding the good or doing what's contrary to God's will consistently is a bad habit and therefore a vice. To seek the will of self is the way of vice. Vice pulls you away from God's purpose for your life and ultimately leaves us feeling empty. So if you can identify with that feeling of emptiness, that feeling of being unfulfilled. When I felt that, I had to really examine, okay, well, I know what my goals are. I know what my idea of success is, but why am I feeling empty? Why am I feeling this void? And that led me to really do some self reflection, which is a big part of the Christmas season and the end of year as we are transitioning from, one chapter in our lives to the next. And I had to look at myself and say, okay, well, these are the things that are holding you back. And it's only through that honest reflection that I'm able to truly identify, what are the things that are just driving me nuts, to be quite honest with you, and this frustration. But I hadn't honestly taken a look at a lot of them because I just didn't feel like there was a way to overcome them. I just felt like there were certain parts of my life and my character that were um, as is, and I'd have to kind of find a way around them, not truly believing that I could be truly transformed. And then I was introduced to the idea of the golden mean. And it says here that for every virtue, there are opposing extremes of vice. One vice is a lack of or deficiency of a virtue. The other vice is an excess or disorder of a virtue. Virtue then is the golden mean between the margins of vice. Now, for me, one thing that I do believe in and I've often sought in my life is to have balance. I don't want to get too high or too low. I had a boss once when I was working at Foot Locker back in the day, and he was great because he would say, you never want to get too high, and you never want to get too low. You want to keep consistent. You want to stay on that level playing field. So when I heard this, I was like, well, maybe I do have a little bit more faith in this than I had thought. And I had been achieving this in different things. So, for example, I really believe in health and fitness, but I've done things where I've overexerted myself physically, and you get an injury, and you're forced to kind of fall back and chill. Or the opposite of that extreme is where you just allow laziness to kind of take over, and you stop making strides, and one day becomes 3 days, and 3 days becomes 3 weeks, and 3 weeks becomes 3 months, and then before you know it, you're feeling defeated, but you're like, I have to do something different. And so I would get back into the gym and be feeling great and wonder, why did I ever leave this? I've done this with the gospel, right? When I'm just feeling lost with different things in life, and I'm like, where are my answers? But I haven't been studying, I haven't been reading, I haven't been in the Word, and I've just been doing things to fill time that help me feel good, that help me feel better for the moment, but aren't really helping me take true strides towards my goals and my dreams. So finding that balance, right? And the golden mean. A couple examples. If I want to be an honest person, which is something that I've prided myself on, one of the things that I have found in my life is that sometimes I've just been the opposite side of this, right? So if we're talking about with virtue, there's two opposing extremes on the side of it in which the excess or the disorder of honesty, that would relate to something that is known as bluntness. Now, a lot of times people feel like that's a good thing. I mean, I think in our society, because we deal with so much lying, that people are just like, give it to me straight. But we can be harsh with that, right? There's this saying that it doesn't matter. It's not so much what you say, but how you say it. So if I'm delivering truth, but I'm doing it in a way which is tearing people down, then that truth is not going to be a seed that penetrates the heart and will help the person that I'm trying to deliver truth to. And in actuality, it'll do more damage than it'll do good. The opposite of that is being dishonest. If someone's struggling and if they're going through some issues, and I can from the outside looking in see, okay, well, you're struggling this because you're doing XYZ, but instead I'm just like, nah, you're good. It'll work out. And I'm not being honest with them about what it is. Whether I'm doing that towards someone else or to myself, we get nowhere. We stay stuck. And honestly, we start to regress. but honestly is delivering that message with love. And that is also, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast, because we deal with so many different issues in life. And there are, people who I agree with in principle, but their delivery is just bashing. And on the opposite extreme, we see this, that there's so much brashness around things that are negative, whether it just be elevating sensual sexuality, or if it's violence, or money, getting money. All these things seem to take precedence over what really is important in life, which is the relationships that we have with each other and the relationships that we have with God. Now, in and of themselves, sex is not bad. Sometimes violence is necessary to defend friends or family, and money is one of the means that we need to be able to survive in life. But seeking those things too much, or totally neglecting those things, result in a life that's unfulfilled. So the golden mean, this was just a breath of fresh air for me, because it was finding the balance in these things. But how do we do that? How do we find that balance? If I am a sinful person and I have all these different emotions that sometimes could sway me, how do I keep consistent? How do I stay on that route to success? What is the path? Well, it's a new year. And one of the reasons why I love a new year, or the reason why I love birthdays, or the reason why I might even love a new car, or new clothes, because you feel fresh, you feel ready and equipped to move forward, shedding some of the old things that have held you back, and now you want to move forward with this renewed look, or this stature that's going to help you be successful as you are going after the excitement of life, which I think that's what we should have. And when you think about, a new relationship, or a new step in a relationship, or if you think about, a new birth of a baby, and the excitement that brings, or a new opportunity in your life, like, these things bring us joy, and there's something that we constantly look for, which is oftentimes why we can do the negative of that, and lose sight of the things that are consistently successful, because that new thing feels good. But the balance, right? The balance is what we're after. So how do we both embrace the new on a consistent track, so to speak? In the scriptures, it talks about renewing our mind. One of my favorite verses, but I had it misunderstood for a long time, but I'll share it with you here. It says, "Do not conform yourselves to this age, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and pleasing and perfect." And that's Romans 12:2. Well, how do I renew my mind, right? How do I just fix this thing that seems to be giving me so many different challenges, right? When I have these patterns of bad thought, or I have these things that affect my thinking, and I can't, like, just take this brain I have out of my head and replace it with a new one. It's not like the Matrix, where I can just, download a bunch of new information in an instant and be changed. But it is similar. As a filmmaker, one of the things I love is that these things mirror, we are a mirror, really, of the creation that we are a part of. So though it may not necessarily be exactly like that, learning about, renewing the mind was really the key to help me understand that, though it's not necessarily as instant as I'd want, it is possible over time. So when you talk about living a virtuous life, and the act of doing a good deed, well, vices seem to be very easy to fall into, because it seems easier to do bad things than it is to do good things. And perhaps this is true. I want to share with you a quote that kind of points this out. So Aristotle's quote says, "It is possible to fail in many ways, for evil belongs to the class of the unlimited, and good to that of the limited. While to succeed is possible only in one way, for which reason also one is easy and the other difficult. To miss the mark, easy. To hit it, difficult. For these reasons also, then, excess and defect are characteristics of vice, and the mean of virtue for men are good in but one way, but bad in many. And I think this is why the Bible says that, the road of sin is one that is very wide, but the narrow road is very difficult, because there is one way to success. There is one way to succeed, but there's many ways to screw up along that route. And so in finding the fact that these good deeds repeated consistently will essentially build strength. No different than if I get consistent reps in the weight room, then I'll build strength over time. The other piece of that is that it gets easier to get up and go and pursue that goal. When you've been out of the weight room for a while, when you've been out of practice with anything, it's harder to get started. But after consistent time in doing so, it gets easier to do that. And vice versa, when I don't want to do the things that prevent me from being successful in the weight room, like eating too much sugar or staying up late, or not drinking enough water, it gets easier to not continue to make those bad decisions, because I get more addicted, so to speak, to the success than I do the failure. The vice versus the virtue. The challenge is believing that this is actually obtainable, because we all know that we're going to have our ups and our downs. And it really is only through doing that I have gained that true belief that it's possible. By the consistent work, then when you find yourself several weeks into that consistent works and you feel the benefit of challenge yourself, and you feel stronger, and then you recognize that you can do it. There's no shortcuts to that. No one can insert that into you. You have to make the decision and follow through with it. And the question is, can we? And renewing of the mind, it was a sermon once taught on this verse that let me know that it is actually a decision. It's actually something that we need to do, not something that we need to wish God is going to do for us. It's a choice that we have to take on. So it all comes down to training our mind. One, the decision that we need to be resolute in, unwavering in. And then the training of our mind to be consistent with it. And really using our will to take it one day at a time and to build one good decision at a time. Knowing, which for me was a benefit, knowing that it will get easier over time. Therefore, I don't have to feel trapped by my bad decisions, and I don't have to feel beholden to them. I just need to, in that moment, make the right decision, and little by little, it gets easier day by day. Ralph Waldo Emerson has a quote that I found was very impactful in helping me understand this too. He says, "Sow a thought and you reap an action. Sow an action and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny." Again, it's being action oriented in our thinking, and that will translate into our actions. A mentor of mine once told me something that we always share with our kids, is that there are two things in life that you can control. The two A's is your attitude and your activity. And if you maintain a positive attitude, then you'll have positive action. But if you maintain a negative attitude, you'll maintain a negative action. Napoleon Hill also has a quote that speaks to this. You have absolute control over just one thing: your thoughts. The divine gift is the sole means by which you may control your destiny. If you fail to control your mind, you will control nothing else. It's the accountability factor that I think we need to accept here. And that is that we do have the power to choose. We may not be able to control everything, but that one power, that one gift that we have is that of choice. And so I just want to encourage you today. I want to encourage you to believe this, because as a man thinketh, so is he. So if we don't believe, then we're correct. If we do believe, then we're correct. Believe in your power of choice in everything that you do. 2024 is going to be a year of many impactful choices. For the American, I want to encourage you to vote. Vote your conscience. Study. Show yourself approved in all things that you can that are of God. And also study to know what is good so that we can make the right decisions for our country, and then make the choice to go and vote and be active in your community. But in order to do that, first you have to be active in your own life. One of the ways in which we can know what is right, we can know what is good, is to make sure that we meditate on the things that are powerful. And as a musician, this is something that I really also had to be accountable with. When I was looking for things of inspiration, I love hip hop. I think hip hop is one of the greatest musical art forms that there is. And the same goes for film. The art of story, the art of words, and crafting them together in a way that can influence another human being or influence myself. Often I write for myself first and others as well, right? The point is, if I can encourage my own heart with what I'm creating, I hope that I can pass that on. That's the way that I see it, in the way in which I can be genuine in what I do. And I had to stop meditating on things that were killing my heart and killing my spirit. And hip hop used to be one that was edifying. And its roots come from the Underground Railroad, right? Where when the Black community in America was enslaved and we were seeking the path to freedom, we would code that path in the spirituals that were not only edifying to God, but they were also showing others how to find the Underground Railroad so that they could escape slavery and find freedom. And in order for us to do that in today's age, we have to make sure that we are not enslaving ourselves with the things in which we put into our hearts and to our minds. Philippians 4:8 says, "Fill your minds with those things that are good and that deserve praise, things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and honorable. Put into practice what you've learned." You know, there's a saying that says that knowledge is power, and I've often had a problem with that, because I believe it is the slight deception there is that the knowledge itself is where the power is held. But say for instance, if you have the gift to sing or to speak or to do finance or to whatever you fill in the blank, whatever your gift is, if you have that knowledge that you don't apply it, it does nothing. If I have the gift to sing, but I don't sing, no one can benefit from, the blessing of what that music would do to the human spirit as it relates to uplift. And I also have a responsibility to make sure that I'm using that gift properly, that I use it to do that, to inspire, as opposed to manipulate or to tear down or to deceive. 1 Peter 1:13, verses 13 through 15 says, "So then, have your minds ready for action. Keep alert and set your hope completely on the blessing which will be given to you when Jesus Christ is revealed. Be obedient to God and do not allow your lives to be shaped by those desires you had when you were still ignorant. Instead, be holy in all that you do, just as God, who called you, is holy." Again, it's time to be people of action, but first it starts within the mind. So to wrap this up, I simply wanted to give you some what I think are simple and perhaps not so easy tools to help equip you. I think one of the most important things to realize here for the believer is that these things are unattainable without God's help. we are unable to accomplish this goal if we don't have love in our heart. And in order to have love in our heart, we have to have God in our lives. And in order to have a close relationship with him, we have to invest in that relationship with God. And through that, he will give us the strength to overcome our vices and give us the resolve to stay true to a life lived of virtue. And my prayer and my hope for you in 2024 is that you will accomplish this goal. So take action. And guarding your mind, it is the most precious tool that you have. Make sure that you preserve it. The scriptures talk about putting on the full armor of God. And with that, it talks about the helmet of salvation. And that comes from accepting Jesus not only into your life, but then picking up your cross daily and following him. So that's it. I just want to let you know that there is a way, there is a pathway forward. And lastly, I'll close with this. The way to cross over that valley from ignorance to wisdom, from fearfulness to bravery, self-indulgence to self-control, unfaithfulness to faithfulness, illusion to truth, is to build a bridge of knowledge and understanding. In the teachings of virtue, the ways of Christ, turning the rudder of your free will toward a union with God's will, opening the sails of your soul, allowing the grace of the Holy Spirit to fill you and carrying you ever onward. Happy New Year, and until next time, one love.